Hello. Some of the vehicles in 40k are brilliant, some are bizarre, and some are just utterly grotshit. But which are the best? I'm Jordan, this is Jordan Sorcery, and today I'm counting down my 5 favourite Warhammer 40,000 vehicles. Right, before we get into the actual countdown, let's just quickly cover off a couple of the rules for when I do one of these odd little videos. I am delving into the history of Games Workshop in an attempt to pull back some of my favourites. There's no definitive list here, it's just things I think are fun or goofy or great to talk about. There are supposed to be 5, but occasionally I get lost in the nostalgia and throw out a few other examples as well. In this case, we're covering Warhammer 40,000 vehicles. That means anything, any vehicle, a machine that is used to transport goods or people, ammo or equipment, weapons, whatever, across the 41st millennium in some fashion. It does not have to be an actual miniature, but it does have to be something that's present in the setting, in the universe, in the art, or in the writing somewhere, so that we can prove that it is a Games Workshop official vehicle from 40k. I've done other videos like this about my favourite White Dwarf issues, about my favourite Warhammer fantasy vehicles. I've included a link in the description if you want to check out those, but for now, it's time for 40k. So let's get started and find out what is in the warp waiting for us. Well, I've started with one of the biggest. There are loads of amazing titans. Eldar titans, for instance, I think are just awesome. Orc gargants are very, very cool. And there's plenty of Imperial titans that I think are awesome as well. But when it comes to titans, there's only one that feels appropriately Titanicus for me, and that is the Imperator. Several years after the appearance of Adeptus Titanicus, Jervis Johnson's game of epic battles between gigantic robots, and still more time after Space Marine had offered up miniature men to fight alongside the feet of those titans, there would come a new game at this epic scale, Titan Legions. Alongside Orc Bonebreaker tanks and Imperial Knights, the game included 2 new types of utterly enormous titan. The Orcs got Mega Gargants, 2 of them, and the Imperium got the largest titan we would ever see, the Emperor-class Imperator Titan. The Imperator is quite literally a cathedral on legs, ancient temples of the Emperor administered by the Adeptus Mechanicus, and bristling with defense towers, void shields, and carrying the Hellstorm cannon and Plasma Annihilator. The data card for this machine of destruction was enormous, and quite frankly beautiful, and the Imperator Titan's model is just magnificent. The scale and gothic excess of it all just screams 40k to me. It is absurdly over the top, completely impractical, and a perfect example of the Imperium turning on the spinal tap and whacking the base up to 11. Terrifically fun and cool at the same time, and presenting that magical science fiction that underpins the scale and terror of the 40k setting in a single massive model. And just whilst we're here, I wanted to add in a little bit of a bonus love of mine that falls sort of within the Titan space, the 2-legged Scout Titans that were created and converted by Tony Cottrell. Featured in White Dwarf and the Fantasy Miniatures book celebrating the 89 Golden Demon, these scratch-built walkers have always been an absolute wonder, converted from the base of a Star Wars 80 ST Scout Walker and the shell of a Zoid. They are just brilliant, toy-based inspiration. Okay, so I knew I wanted to include a troop transport in this list because I think they're great and they make an amazing part of the game of 40k. But it was always going to be tough, and I was always going to be drawn to some of my favourite guys, the Tau. And one of their troop transports that I think is awesome is the Tau Orca. Dating back to art in the original Tau Codex and featured heavily in the 2003 video game, Warhammer 40,000 Fire Warrior, the Orca is simply an ace flying transport vessel operated by the Tau Aircast. The official Forge World model was stuffed full of a flight crew, ethereal, fire warrior squad, and crisis suit carrying rack, like it was some sort of train station tie shop. To me, the Orca is just an incredible, now sadly very rare bit of awesome model making. And yet, I could not bring myself to choose my beloved Tau because there's actually other transports that are even higher in my list that come to my mind first when I think about amazing troop transports from 40k. Some of those are Imperial transports. The Imperial Guard Chimera is a tremendous model, an absolute workhorse that has formed the basis of several other excellent tank kits over the year. It was even the cornerstone of an Adeptus Arbites riot control vehicle that was featured in the Citadel Journal, and which I absolutely loved. In fact, I loved it so much that I traded a ton of classic White Dwarf issues with a staff member back in the day so that they would build the same conversion for me. And even yetier yet, I still couldn't choose the Chimera because despite it being awesome and having so many amazing variants, there is just a vehicle that comes to mind, a transport that's so iconic from 40k that it just had to take this spot in my list, and that is the Space Marine Rhino. Released as RTB-012, the plastic Imperial Rhino armoured assault vehicle dates back to the Rogue Trader days. Originally available as a transport choice for all Imperium forces, including the Imperial Guard and the squats, by second edition, the kit was repackaged as the Space Marine Rhino, and it became the iconic vehicle of the Astartes, even if it still had other applications here and there. The early model, now affectionately referred to as the Mark I Rhino, was comprised of 4 sprues, with the hull being cleverly mirrored from top to bottom. Using the same track and hull sprues twice in the box meant that they could reduce the plastic moulding tools and the costs in order to produce the kit. Oh, and back in 1988, there were even a range of Citadel Rhino Marines, designed specifically to be attached to the outside of the Rhino, riding along as if they're 1920s gangsters or Gorka Morka orcs. Listen, I know that this particular choice is going to get probably a fair bit of pushback because there are some amazing tanks in 40k, an incredible number of incredible tanks, in fact. Maybe the Land Raider, any of its various different versions could have been in this slot, or the absolutely gorgeous Jez Goodwin Falcon Grav tank for the Eldar. That's also amazing. You know, I was very close to even putting Rick Priestley's classic deodorant bottle conversion into a grav tank into this slot, but I just had to go with my heart, and my heart says that tiny little grot tanks are just adorable. The vehicles of the Greenskins in 40k have always held a certain Heath Robinson, Rube Goldberg, weird boy doing it for themselves vibe that I am absolutely awesomely keen on. Despite my affinity for the clean lines and sleek designs of Tau or Eldar vehicles, there is still something about Orc, Gretchen, Grot machinery that holds a particular charm all of its own. Whether that's the bombers or the battle wagons, they just seem to look cool, and none of them are cooler or indeed cuter than the tiny clown car looking death machines that are the Grot tanks. Released, I believe, around 2010, the Grot tanks are easily the most recent miniatures on my list. The tanks themselves were sculpted by Darren Parwood, with crew models designed by Mark Bedford. I've come close to buying these many times, even though I do not currently have, or to the best of my recollection, have ever had a proper Orc army for 40k. And I just think that's something to do with the whimsy of these models and how much joy they bring me. Every time I see them, I am inspired to sit down and write rules for a wacky races style vehicle combat game in the 41st millennium that just features 4 grots and their untrustworthy tanks racing across a planet until the tracks fall off and they have to keep running along Flintstone style. I mean, look at this Wacky Races annual. The Grot tanks fit right in. In case it wasn't clear, I just find these miniatures fun. Well. I don't think anybody, including me, expected this list of 5 favourite vehicles from 40k to include 2 slots taken by Orcs and Goblins, Grots and Greenskins. It was not something I was planning for, but when I sat down to write the list and I was doing my research and I was spending time ruminating on what I think is fun about 40k and what I love to see on the tabletop, I couldn't help but choose these classic guys, the Roborgs. There are plenty of amazing walking machines available to the Orcs. Stompers are pretty special, and killer cans are just brilliant. But recently at Warhammer World, I encountered for the first time something I couldn't explain and couldn't forget. So that's when I had to dig into the history books to try and find out exactly what this amazing thing was. In the early 90s, famed miniature sculptor Bob Ollie joined Citadel with a contract to produce new models under his own Iron Claw label. The range would include beastmen, space pirates, skeletons, and plenty more stuff. And even after the departure of Ollie from Citadel, some of those ranges would continue to be produced and sold by Games Workshop. Whilst I have a lot of affection for the Iron Claw infantry, I mean, look at these squats. There were a few unusual, rare releases that had escaped my notice under the label as well. Along with Drunk Dwarfs and Black Orcs, there was a Megabot and a Squat hovercar, both great fun in their own right. And that hovercar chassis would turn up again later as the cockpit for something even greater and funner, the Roborgs. They were released sometime around 87 or 88 according to the Amazing Stuff of Legends website, and they were not widely available. You could only briefly buy them in a blister described as IC701 Mechanical Robot. However, the miniature tab reads Roborg, which was presumably the original and arguably superior name. These guys have a ton of zany mech boy charm, and I would love to see them reinvented for the modern game. And if not, I would just love to get hold of one day to have in my collection. Eldar spaceships are cool. There is no better way to describe them. They're just cool, incredibly cool, in fact. And I fought very hard against myself not to include one at the top of this list, because they are iconic, they're brilliant, they look amazing, but there is something that's even cooler than cool. Andy Chambers, in the book The Gothic and the Eldritch, a Jez Goodwin art book, talks about how Eldar spaceships and their designs help to inform another Goodwin design that's even cooler, more elegant, more Eldar than their spaceships, and that is their jet bikes. Appearing in White Dwarf 106, the Eldar jet bike, designed by Jez Goodwin, of course, already had the key elements of its contemporary form even back then, though with a perhaps greater curvature to the Talon-style hood. I actually don't think there's any better way to describe the jet bike than its original advert from White Dwarf. The Eldar jet bike epitomizes the grace and elegance embodied in Eldar civilization. Its sleek lines and well-balanced proportions elevate it from the realms of machinery to those of high art. Like the Eldar themselves, its appearance is deceptive, for beneath the curved exterior lurks a gravitic propulsion unit that can outperform any comparable machine in the galaxy. I think that the design of the Eldar jet bike is just an incredible piece of work. It's very simple, it's very elegant, but it's also really complex and clever. It's artistic and it has this ancient feel to it. It looks futuristic at the same time. Somehow, Jez Goodwin has managed to capture that sort of elven style influence in a futuristic vehicle, and it floats in stark contrast to its Imperium equivalents, where things look a lot more rickety around the same time that the Eldar jet bikes were first invented. I mean, can you imagine feeling safe riding on one of these? And it wasn't just the regular Eldar jet bike that delivered on the brilliance of the enigmatic space elves. The Harlequins had their own bike too, also sculpted by Jez Goodwin. Later in 40k history, Jez Goodwin would then update the Eldar jet bike into different plastic versions as well, always retaining those beautiful lines and the dangerous sting of these mechanical marvels. One of my most fond memories from old games days was when there was a special table set up in the late 90s that had a sort of cloud-based table covering, and all of the players were controlling just a single Eldar jet bike with a lance, and you were essentially jousting on these jet bikes in the sky. It was absolutely awesome. It was so atmospheric, and it just really felt great. It was using miniatures in just the best way possible, having fun and exploring the tabletop in whatever way you wanted with your awesomely beautiful Eldar jet bike miniatures. And you could do it with anything, you could go away and play any kind of game. That's why I loved those old games days. They were so inspirational. And I guess part of why the Eldar jet bike has stayed with me so long is that game. I just absolutely loved it. It was just lodged in my brain as a perfect 40k memory. And we weren't even playing real 40k, but, you know, I guess that's how these things go. In any case, I hope that you've enjoyed my 5 favourite vehicles from 40k. I would love to hear some of yours, so please leave a comment down below. Let me know what 40k vehicle has your heart. And if you would like to support the channel, please consider checking out my Patreon. I've put a link in the description below. You can go there and get access to my Discord. You get early and exclusive content, regular updates, and for the rest of the year, every month I'm doing a free giveaway for my patrons, including recently Warhammer Quest Lost Relics, Moonstone, the starter set for that, and we've got some other fun stuff coming up, so go and check it out. It really supports me and the work I do. It's so important. I also really appreciate if you can like and subscribe and share these videos, because it helps people find out about the channel, and that is a great help. Thank you once again for watching. I'm Jordan, and this is Jordan Sorcery. You know, there was a point when I had in my list the Genestealer Cult limo, but then I just wasn't sure if I wanted to look like an emo kid on the way to the prom.